One of the hardest things to figure out about selling anything at all is how to price it properly. And in the NFT space, this is especially difficult. There are a lot of things to consider, like gas fees and royalties and commissions and buyer pressure. And all of these things play into how you price your collection at the end of the day. So today, I'm gonna help you figure this out by first walking you through how pricing happens, then what costs you have to consider, and finally, how to price your collection. My name is Trent Kennelly. I'm a metaverse marketing strategist, and this is the best channel for you to learn about the metaverse, NFTs, and marketing. So if that sounds good to you and you're excited, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, comment and let me know what your biggest pricing challenge is right now. I would love to help you down in the comments, and let's get started. All right, real quick before we jump in, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not even telling you what or how to buy. I'm just telling you how to price your collection from a marketing perspective. That's all we're focused on here. So please don't take anything as financial advice. All right, now let's go. So let's talk first about how pricing happens. So this is a lot like traditional art markets in the sense that the artist is very important. So a Van Gogh is gonna sell for way more than something that I made yesterday on a piece of paper in my kitchen, right? Nobody knows me as an artist. Nobody's really interested in my art. And so artists' profiles and artist reputation is going to tend to drive the price up higher. But that said, that's not always due to how skilled the artist is or whether people really like this person as an artist. So a great example here is Gary Vee. Gary Vee is not known as an artist. He's known as a marketer and a business person, but he has his NFT collection that prices very strongly. And the reason for that is because he's a known entity. He has other things that are offered along with the NFT, but because he's a known entity, that's more likely to drive sales numbers. So it's adding that buyer pressure, which is what being a very well-known artist would do as well. It adds buyer pressure. Buyer pressure is another word for FOMO, fear of missing out, where people feel the pressure to make a purchase from your collection right away. The minute that it's launched, they're gonna wanna buy something so that they are not the one who misses out, which is great because that adds buyer pressure on the secondary market as well, so that anybody who missed out on the first offering can then go buy on the secondary market and starts with the trading and all that sort of stuff, which is excellent for you, even though it sounds like it wouldn't affect you anymore because you have commissions, okay? We're gonna get into that in a few minutes, but whatever commission that you attach to your NFT, you will be able to collect on that forever, okay? So this is the thing that goes together here. We've got the artist reputation, we've got the reputation of other owners of the NFT, we've got how quickly that NFT is moving. It's being traded left and right, up and down. If it's not really moving that fast, that's not gonna help the valuation very much, and the future projections of this NFT. And so all of those things play into the price. And it's important to note that while that is for secondary markets for the most part, everything is predicated on how you start pricing. So if you start pricing things all at 0.001 Ethereum, then you're not gonna get any traction right away. It's gonna take longer to get there. Well, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Just understand for now that we have these four elements that play into pricing and make it work. All right, next let's talk about your costs, because understanding the cost of selling an NFT collection or a TV or food or digital services or whatever it is really important, because if you don't have a clear view on what the costs are, you could be pricing under what you're paying for it, right? So your cost could be 100 and you're selling your NFT for 50. That does you no good, right? Because you're just losing money on every single transaction. That is ultimately a losing proposition. So first let's talk about gas fees. This is a pretty big topic. It's what it costs to make your NFT sale happen on the blockchain. Basically, it's a payment in exchange for the energy that is required to make your NFT sale happen, to mint your NFT on whatever blockchain it is, Ethereum, Solana, etc. You can think of it kind of like a transaction fee, but I want to be really careful about that term because there are also transaction fees on OpenSea, Rarible, etc., and that's not what this is. This is a fee to the blockchain itself. This has nothing to do with OpenSea or Rarible, okay? Now there are two types of gas, and if you're a first-time minter and you've never done it before on a particular blockchain, both of these are going to affect you. If this is your second time, only one of these will be important because there's a one-time and a recurring fee. So the one-time is an account initialization fee, and your recurring fee would be a token or contract approval fee. So an account initialization fee sets up your account on the Ethereum network or Solana network or whatever for sales. So you can kind of think of this like a merchant center account opening. You're saying, hey, I'm open for business. Here's my fee to make that happen. So now I can start selling through your platform. And then the recurring fees, there are plenty of situations where this happen. It's kind of on a moment-to-moment basis, and the basic theory here is that whenever you're writing to the blockchain and you have to make an update or an edit, that is when you get a fee for it, okay? So examples are accept an offer, transfer or gift an NFT to someone, buy an NFT, cancel a listed NFT, cancel a bid, convert WETH, which is wrapped Ethereum, which is what you're using for pre-authorized bidding with Ethereum, to Ethereum or vice versa, freeze your metadata, which is storing information in the blockchain in order to preserve it going forward, or bridge and withdraw Ethereum to and from Polygon, which is just a wire transfer if you're wire transferring Ethereum to Polygon or Polygon to Ethereum, etc. Now you're going to notice that I didn't give you any dollar figures for this. And the reason for that is that the actual prices for all of these things vary wildly. It is kind of like crazy how much they wildly vary, okay? It can even depend on the time of day that the NFT is being minted because of how much load might be on the system at that time of day, okay? So really you want to pay close attention to when you're minting and what the price is like when you're trying to take these actions to make sure that you're not losing upwards of hundreds of dollars per transaction here. So next let's talk about platform commissions. So everything we just talked about with gas fees, with commissions to the Ethereum network, etc. OpenSea and Rarible don't see any of that. But they need to make money too, right? They're providing you a service and you should have to pay them for that service. So this is where platform commissions or transaction fees come into play. You can expect to pay something on every transaction. On OpenSea and Rarible, it's both 2.5% transaction fee. However, important to note that on OpenSea, that's only 2.5% to the seller, whereas on Rarible, that's 2.5% to both the buyer and the seller. Each of them have to pay 2.5%. So really important to check the platform rules to get the specifics on transaction fees because it's different from platform to platform. But any way you look at it, it's a really good thing that this happens at the end of the transaction because if you're the seller and you've decided not to lazy mint and you'll mint everything at one time, you obviously have a lot of gas fees that go into that at the beginning, and that's really painful, right? And so you don't have to worry about the transaction fee unless you make that purchase happen, unless you get someone to actually buy your NFT, right? Whereas if you were to lazy mint, you would have to pay for the minting fee and for the transaction fee at the same time. Not a bad situation. It just means that lazy minting mints the NFT at the end once the sale has happened versus minting everything at the same time. That really reduces your costs. Okay, so now let's talk about how to price. And to understand how to price, there's always a lot of different facets in anything that you do, okay? There's a balance between too high, too low, rarity, etc. So let's start with the basics. Let's talk about supply and demand. So the basic rule of supply and demand is the more of something that there is, the less that you can charge for it. So if every single NFT in your collection is unique, the price for those NFTs will tend to be higher. Whereas if every NFT is one of X copies, the price is going to tend to be lower. The more of something you have, the less the demand. The less of something you have, the higher the demand. That's how it works. This is why most NFT collections today are algorithmically created to be 100% unique, even if there are 10,000 pieces on offer. And then when you add in the idea of rarity, that price can increase even more. So what do I mean by rarity? Because we already covered that supply and demand is basically rarity. It's if something is more rare, if there's less of it, then the demand for it is higher, right? And if the demand is lower, that must mean that the supply is higher, generally speaking. But here, I'm not talking about the rarity of the entire NFT, one single NFT. I'm talking about the traits, because again, NFTs are made up of traits and they are algorithmically programmed to change based on, how many NFTs you have and what the rarity of that trait is, okay? So you can assign a rarity. You can say, I want this one to be super rare. It only appears in 2% of all of the NFTs in my collection, which if those NFT traits are desired by the market is going to drive the price of those particular NFTs up, which will in turn drive the price of the entire collection up. Another important point of NFT pricing is the range of the collection. And by range, we're talking about the differences between the individual NFTs in the collection. Now, of course, we all know that there's going to be a lot of similarities, but if the differences aren't obvious, the value is probably not going to be that high because you're not going to get those rare traits if nobody can identify them from the not rare traits, okay? So in this case, I don't want you to go out there thinking that some enormous range is better because the range affects the floor price, which affects the entire collection's price. Okay, so really quickly, what is floor price? It's the price of the cheapest NFT for sale in your collection. And people rely on that floor price to determine if some of those rarer items that are more expensive are worth what you're pricing them at. So effectively what we're looking at here, now that we understand floor, is the range and the price movement of the collection in that secondary market goes up or down more drastically if you have a smaller collection than it does if you have a bigger collection. Next, let's talk about royalties. So as the creator of the NFT collection, you have the ability to set a commission that you're paid on every transaction of the NFT, no matter who the buyer and the seller are. That commission can be between 5 and 50% depending on the platform. So OpenSea allows a maximum of 10%, Rarible, I think it's like 50% or something like that, which might make you think, great, I'll just start at 50% commission and bada bing, free money. I don't have to do anything else. But slow down, because that commission comes out of the seller's cut. So the seller already has to pay 2.5% to OpenSea, and now they have to pay you 5 or 50% as well. So that's an easy way to turn people away if it's too high. I would really suggest setting a royalty fairly low. I would even say 5% can't hurt. And the reasoning here is that people are going to expect a commission to be in place. That's not surprising, but they don't want to be discouraged by seeing, oh yeah, there is a commission, but it's half of everything that you're going to get when you sell it. That's not interesting to anybody, okay? And as your NFT increases in value, you're still going to earn a pretty healthy commission on 5%. All right, so before we go, I want to talk about pricing psychology, because it's really important to understand the psychology around buying decisions in this particular scenario. Now, you can check out this video for some more general ideas of pricing psychology, but here I want you to remember that people are usually looking at a list of all the NFTs in your collection, and the price is usually prominently displayed on each of these NFTs cards. This is pretty significant because people are going to start to see things like the range of prices for your different NFTs, and especially if they sort by price, your trends are going to become super clear really quickly, okay? You might have like 15 of them at 0.1, 20 of them at 0.2, on and on and on, and then you've got like 5,000 of them are at 1 Ethereum, okay? And everybody's gonna see that and they're gonna see, oh, that's a price ceiling that you never go above, and that's gonna slow down the valuation process and increasing the value of that NFT. That you need to remember that these are tradable commodities in the same way that art is in the conventional sense. If you go into an open art gallery and see the artist selling everything for the same exact price, how does that make you feel? It feels like there's no special value in owning one over the other, like they're all the same, right? And then if you add in the fact that in the NFT space, that flat pricing structure makes it clear that those NFTs have never been sold at all, you have a mob mentality problem. Nobody's gonna buy because they can see that nobody else in the mob is buying. So a great example here is the Meta Elements collection. So there's a large enough variation if you look at the different NFTs in this collection that it indicates to potential buyers that there's something causing one piece to be more expensive than another. And that staggering is leading to more people buying it, which is going to lead to a higher floor and more commissions to you, etc. All good things, right? Also, by the way, just want to say, if you haven't checked this one out yet, it's super cool. It's not mine, but I love the feel of it, and the music just adds this ambiance to each piece. I absolutely love it. It's really cool. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because that staggered pricing, that crooked pricing, just leads to more people feeling, oh yes, this has been sold before, or oh yes, there's a reason for this pricing over that. So there you go. Those are the best ways to think about how to price your NFTs. It's a complicated world, but ultimately this should help you to make the right decisions. Let me know how your launch has gone, what you've been pricing at up to this point, if you're thinking about increasing those prices, what you're basing that on, etc. I would love to know and even help you out in the comments. Otherwise, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, and I will catch you in the next one.